White woman takes black CEO's seat on plane. The shocking moment. He realizes who he is. The airplane cabin was alive with the sounds of passengers shuffling into their seats, buckling seatbelts and settling in for the flight. The low hum of the engines was already filling the air, a constant companion during any flight. But this seemingly normal flight, which had started like any other, would quickly spiral into an unforgettable confrontation. Ethan Johnson, a man in his early 40s with a calm yet commanding presence, had boarded the flight with the quiet confidence that came from years of success. As the CEO of a multi-million-dollar airline, he was accustomed to high-pressure situations. He was used to traveling the world, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, and navigating the complex dynamics of business relationships. But today, as he stepped into the cabin of his own airline, he wasn't prepared for what would transpire. Ethan had just come off a grueling week of meetings. His eyes were tired, and his mind was already on the work waiting for him at his destination. He had planned to relax for the short flight, get some much-needed rest, and maybe review a few documents on his tablet before arriving. He made his way down the aisle toward his first-class seat, a seat that had been carefully selected for him during the booking process, one that would offer him comfort and privacy. But as he approached, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, sitting in his seat, was a woman in her mid-40s, casually flipping through a magazine as though nothing was out of the ordinary. At first glance, she appeared completely unaware of her surroundings, absorbed in her own world. But Ethan couldn't help but notice the strange familiarity about her, the way she held herself, the way she seemed to dismiss the world around her as if she owned the space. Ethan cleared his throat, politely asking, "Excuse me, but that's my seat." His tone was firm yet calm, the type of voice a CEO would use when addressing a minor inconvenience. The woman glanced up at him, her eyes briefly scanning him before returning to her magazine. She didn't seem to hear him. Ethan's brow furrowed. He cleared his throat a little louder. "Excuse me, that's my seat," he repeated, standing in the aisle, waiting for her to acknowledge him. Finally, she looked up at him with a faint smile. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, but her tone was dismissive. "I'm sure you can find another seat. It's no big deal." She barely made eye contact, completely disregarding the fact that this was Ethan's designated seat. Ethan's patience was thinning, but he tried to stay composed. "Actually, no. It's really not okay. This is my seat and I need you to move." For a moment, the woman blinked at him, her smile not changing. "I'm not going anywhere. I've been sitting here for a while now, and it's not like anyone's going to care. Besides, it's just a seat." Her tone was laced with indifference, and there was a hint of condescension in her words. Ethan's frustration began to build. How could she be so blasé about something so simple, something so straightforward? But it wasn't just about the seat anymore. It was about the subtle arrogance in her words, the assumption that she had the right to take what didn't belong to her, simply because she felt entitled to do so. Before he could respond, the flight attendant passed by, offering her standard pre-flight service. Seeing Ethan's stance and the tense interaction unfolding, the flight attendant stopped and looked between him and the woman in his seat. She didn't know what to do. Caught between the policies of the airline and the realization that something was happening here, something that was bigger than just a seat. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation building. The other passengers had started to notice the exchange. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, trying to ignore the scene, while others glanced nervously, clearly unsure how to react. As the tension in the cabin grew, the woman, now clearly irritated, shifted in her seat, clearly unwilling to move. Ethan's pulse quickened, and he realized this wasn't just an ordinary exchange. The woman had taken the seat assigned to him, but her behavior, her entitled, dismissive attitude, was something Ethan had encountered many times before. People often assumed that because of the color of his skin, he didn't belong in certain spaces. This was just another subtle version of that same prejudice, but this time he wasn't about to let it slide. Have you ever been made to feel invisible or treated unfairly because of how you look or where you come from? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about the small injustices we face daily. Ethan had always been driven, Raised in a modest home, he had learned early on that nothing in life came easily, especially not for someone like him. A black man born into a working-class family in the city, Ethan understood that the world didn't always see him for who he was, an ambitious, hard-working individual. Instead, people often saw him through the lens of their biases and assumptions. From a young age, Ethan's mother had taught him to stand tall in the face of adversity. She had raised him as a single parent, working long hours as a nurse to support him. Ethan had watched her sacrifice everything for him to have a better life. Her strength was his foundation, but it also instilled in him an awareness of the racial obstacles he would inevitably face. Ethan excelled in school, earning a scholarship to a prestigious college. It was there that he realized his passion for business and his desire to prove that success wasn't determined by the color of your skin, but by your drive, your determination, and your ability to rise above the system that tried to keep you down. He graduated with honors, and after several years of working his way up in the corporate world, Ethan became the CEO of a major airline. But with that title came the weight of expectations, not just from his employees, but from the world. As one of the few black CEOs in the aviation industry, he was constantly aware that he had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. But Ethan had never let that deter him. He believed that leadership was about more than just making decisions for a company. It was about making a difference. His company was more than a business. It was a representation of everything he had worked for and a symbol of what was possible when someone refused to be confined by societal limitations. As a husband and father, Ethan's life had also been shaped by the people he loved most. His wife, Maya, was his partner in every sense. She had supported him through every obstacle, and together, they raised their children to understand the importance of integrity, of never compromising who they were for the comfort of others. When Ethan boarded that plane, he wasn't just a CEO. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a black man traveling home to see his family. He was a father, a husband, and someone who refused to let the world define him by anything other than his achievements. Susan Bennett, the woman who had taken Ethan's seat, was the product of privilege. Privilege she hadn't earned, but one that had been handed to her. Raised in a suburban neighborhood, Susan had never known what it was like to struggle, to feel looked down upon or underestimated. Her family had wealth, influence, and a long history of social connections that made her feel untouchable. She had been educated at private schools, attended one of the top universities, and climbed the corporate ladder with relative ease. To Susan, the world was simple. She worked hard, played by the rules, and was rewarded for her efforts. But there was one thing Susan hadn't been taught: empathy. She hadn't been taught to see the world from someone else's eyes, someone like Ethan, who had had to fight for every inch of success, while people like her were given the benefit of the doubt. When she saw Ethan approaching her seat, her first thought was that it was a mistake. She was entitled to the seat in front of her, wasn't she? She had boarded the flight, sat down, and settled in, so why should she move? To her, it was just a simple mix-up. But when Ethan insisted on taking his seat, and when the flight attendant confirmed it was indeed his, her irritation grew. Susan hadn't expected someone like him to challenge her. And when he did, she found herself defensive. But that defensive attitude quickly morphed into something more unpleasant when she overheard the muttered remarks from the other passengers. Was she really being singled out for this? Did he really think she had done something wrong? In that moment, Susan realized just how much her own privilege had shielded her from facing consequences. She had never been forced to confront her own biases or understand the struggles of those who didn't look like her. But now, here she was, confronted with a black man who was demanding respect, and she was the one who had to adjust.